Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Lucy Sollit, and I'm here along with Hannah Amori from Keiken. And we've been invited to talk to you today about the metaverse. And this conversation has been commissioned by ASA, which is a project by Lighthouse in Brighton, Shesaid.so community, and Oi Futuro, a leading arts and cultural organisation based in Rio. So yeah, thank you everyone for inviting us. And I'll just briefly introduce myself and then hand over to Hannah to introduce herself too. But yeah, so like I say, I'm Lucy Sollit. I'm a curator, writer, researcher, artist mentor based here in London. And my practice really explores the contours of emerging art, technologies, economies and ecologies. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell. And yeah, Keiken is a collaborative practice that's founded by Tanya Cruz, Hannah Amori, and Isabel Ramos. And their work merging the physical and digital is ultimately part of building a free and open metaverse, or you could look at it that way anyway. So yeah, we've got Hannah here today. So yeah, Hannah, would you like to say hello and add anything else you want to add to that intro?
Yeah. So hi everyone. So I guess, yeah, so our practice is quite, it's very multidisciplinary, and I guess like what it's called Keiken, and the reason why it's called Keiken is because it's the Japanese word for experience. So when we first started to collaborate with one another, we did a very trusty spider diagram and basically came up with what connects our practice together, and we came to the word experience, and that whether that's like pushing the boundaries of experience or the nature of experience, so consciousness, exploring the nature of consciousness. And so I guess we're not necessarily like building a metaverse for others to inhabit in the same way. We're more trying to build and imagine what the metaverse could be by simulating new structures and ways of existing, and to test drive potential futures. To us, the metaverse is this fully immersive virtual space of multiple worlds, which allows us to become the architects and collaborators of the future. And our kind of what we want to kind of allow people to imagine or be able to see the metaverse as like piercing our perception of reality and defying all that we know. And we do this through many mediums, whether that's filmmaking, gaming, installation, lots of XR technologies. We pretty much, every time there's a new technology that we hear about, any beta technologies, we're like, yes, we'll try it out. And then we go through this like painful process of like learning a new technology and then regretting it afterwards. And then we also do performance too. And yeah, so we're often exploring how societal interjection governs the way we think, feel and believe.
Amazing. That's like a really nice intro to your work, which we're obviously going to like explore a lot more in this conversation. And now I realize that after years I'm like totally pronouncing your Keiken wrong when I've been saying Keiken, but that's I'm really bad at pronunciation, so apologies. But yeah, so what we thought we'd do is I'm just going to give one definition, I guess more of a kind of formal or something like that. I don't know how you want to put it. I don't think a formal definition actually probably exists of the metaverse, but I'm going to attempt one, some kind, and then Hannah's going to run us through a bit of a kind of presentation which will kind of, I think, bring to life some of the ideas a bit more that Hannah's just been mentioning, and yeah, introduce you to their work. And then after that, I've got some questions that I'd really like to explore with Hannah, and a few things that we want to talk about. The metaverse itself is like a really expansive subject with kind of many creative and critical dimensions to it. But there are a few things that I wanted to kind of pick out for this conversation in particular. One is to kind of talk about audiences briefly. Another is around the body, identity and gender. And then finally about kind of creativity and making in a metaverse type context. And we'll kind of come to these through Keiken's practice. So to kick us off, I'll just kind of have a go at that definition of the metaverse. So yeah, the metaverse has captured many people's imaginations, particularly in the last couple of years, where it's become, I guess, a little bit more hyped. The idea itself has got its roots in science fiction, in particular Neil Stephenson's 1992 novel Snow Crash, where he imagined avatars assembled in virtual worlds. But today, several definitions and ideas are in circulation around the metaverse, and there is debate about how far off it is from being realised, or even whether it would ever exist at all. So yeah, what is it? Well, it could be described as the future present of today's internet, its kind of successor. So one could exchange the idea of web for metaverse and site from website for world. And in this scenario, the metaverse could be described as the sum total of all publicly accessible virtual worlds, real-time 3D content and related media, all kind of connected together on an open global network, controlled by none and accessible to all, or at least that's kind of, would be nice. So the idea is that the metaverse will be underpinned by technologies such as machine learning, 3D interfaces, so that can include things like Hannah was mentioning with the XR technologies, but virtual, augmented, holographic experiences, even organic kind of interfaces. Advanced computer animation as well, so building on the kind already seen in many kind of multiplayer games. And a key part of its novelty is the ability to present information and enable real-time communication in the form of 3D spaces, places, objects, characters. But it doesn't preclude 2D and flat screen-based experiences either. And then again, another dimension of it is blockchain. That's often seen as something that could be part of the metaverse's foundation. So technologies that use blockchain, things like that run on it, things like non-fungible tokens, NFTs, and decentralized autonomous organizations or DAOs could play kind of key roles in enabling privacy, payments, economies, and modes of organizing in the metaverse. But really realizing a kind of full-scale metaverse would take like a lot of investment potentially, and the incumbents of Web2 and major kind of games companies are already kind of well placed to realize some of the innovations required. And as many of you might have come across, Facebook is positioning itself as kind of somehow building it. But yeah, whoever realizes the metaverse and on what terms could have kind of complex philosophical and political implications that ultimately determine the degree to which it happens at all, and to whether people kind of want to be part of it. So right now, nothing's really pinned down, and there's kind of a window of opportunity to experiment with all those kind of technologies that we've been mentioning in different ways. So that is kind of the area that we're exploring, I guess, in this conversation in one way or other. And now I think I can hand over to Hannah to make that much more accessible and bring it alive with your own particular take on it. So yeah, Hannah, if you'd like to kind of talk us through your work.
So I guess for us, the way that we see the metaverse to us is like a cosmic game, and I guess we believe that transporting your consciousness into another realm is a spiritual act. So the way that we're perceiving the metaverse is very much through understanding the nature of all beings that exist, and to understand how our consciousness and our vessel and our environment affect the way we are. What is the code that makes us kind, and what is the code that makes us selfish or ego driven spaces. And so I feel like the way that we're approaching is much more philosophical and symbolic, and is a nurturing act of nurture. There is this, we wrote this piece not that long ago, but it was just explaining it in a short way of thinking about the metaverse and what is it. So I'm just going to read it. So the second I need to move this. Okay, perfect. So the metaverse is currently a buzzword. It has been coming more into the mainstream. In our practice, we're constantly asking ourselves different questions about what is the metaverse and how do we get there. So currently it's very much this like speculative energy of something that people don't understand, but they want to be part of. They're either afraid of it, or they're very enthusiastic, or however they may feel towards it. Is the metaverse a 3D virtual world inhabited by avatars of real people? Is it something to do with NFTs? Is it buying virtual land that is awesome rather than filling your body with a sense of inner peace? Is it a parallel universe grown through our collective minds? So this amazing neuroscientist called Antonio Damasio, who really has been studying what emotional intelligence essentially, and he's written many books about this. And his most recent book, which is called The Strange Order of Things, and he talks about how feelings have not been given the credit they deserve as motors, monitors, and negotiators of cultural human endeavors. And it is feelings that motivate us to build, to invent, and to create all artifacts and instruments of culture. So his thesis is really looking at how like feelings are the very beginning of all that we create for the future, and all that is around us. And Damasio argues that the root of what we build is based on how we feel. So how do we feel right now? How do we feel as a society, a culture? Do we feel free, excited, hopeful, balanced? Or do we feel frustrated, anxious, resentful, and divided? Do we feel with our whole body rather than just within our minds? It is healthy to feel an array of emotions. However, we often place a hierarchy in which emotions are good or bad, positive or negative. But what about the safety and awareness of our feelings, and how do they expel and unfold inside oneself and one another? What happens when we ignore or do not process our feelings on an individual, small, or societal level over many generations and many future generations to come? If energy can neither be created nor destroyed, energy can only be transferred or changed from one form to another. What do they transmute into? Where do they go? What will our contemporary energy transmute into, and where will it go? So I guess it's like we're really thinking about how understanding the invisible and understanding how everything is connected and how everyone feels, not just people who are interested in the metaverse, how every single person feels will affect how our future will change and how it will manifest. If we want to have the responsibility of a godlike act, like which is creating other worlds which encapsulate people and change people's minds and the way they maneuver the gameplay, then if we do that in a way that is driven by our ego, through fear, through resentment to other people, we will trap people, we will be horrible to them, we will bully them, we will be unkind, we will manifest environments that are indulgent, that don't actually make us feel centered or feel connection towards things that aren't just close to you, but to things much further from you that are harder to understand. So I think we're really trying to like position the metaverse in a way that's like far more about our humanness and about our beingness, and that we are connected to everything and that we are part of it together, no matter how far away our knowledge is from that. We started off like we've always been exploring the future and what may the future hold and what kind of ideas are there. And the first film we made about the metaverse was in 2019. So I think I'm so bad at the presentation. So I'm going to show you the trailer for this. And let me know if you can hear it.
I can hear it fine.
it's hard to be responsible of so many lives. I have a molecular and cosmic responsibility. I have roots.
I've been thinking about how apples became extinct on base reality.
Why do you think that is?
In Palm, you can only take one bite, and then you have to throw it away.
Throw away what?
The apple, duh.
Okay, so that's the trailer to the film, and so the idea behind the film was that Alipay disseminated life units because of the climate crisis, and they didn't look after the earth, so therefore they needed a quick resolution. So they put everyone in these life units to exist in the metaverse and to not touch the earth as much. And it explores the implications of living in these metaverses and also having this physical body and this digital body and having to earn points to keep the physical body alive whilst getting lost in the metaverse. And it shows metaverses that don't serve them and ones that do serve them and that are emancipatory, and ways in which they use the technology and the ways in which they occupy different avatars to either learn and progress or to have false senses of connection and all kinds of things. So yeah, I need to go to the next one. Okay, cool. So then next I'm going to show you this piece called Wisdoms for Love 3.0, and this was made in 2021. And it's an interactive, it's basically a game, and it's a decision-making game. And it was kind of when the rise in NFTs and the blockchain started to happen, and we explored how wisdom could be used as a form of currency. So because the blockchain enables forms of exchange that could be more nuanced and more ephemeral, therefore maybe we could change the gameplay on Earth. So for example, we use money. Money is a very efficient way of creating forms of exchange, but it's not philosophical. Like money is not like philosophically like driven. So therefore, if you find through the blockchain, maybe you could create more philosophical forms of exchange and change our gameplay. So I think I have to show you it here. And let me know if you can hear everything.
Each thing is giving a unique center point.
You have to make the quality good.
From your center point, you weave a story of self. This center point will always be yours. It touches you to the earth and positions your axis of existence.
Wisdoms for Love 3.0 is a decision-making game and NFT project inside an installation. It features an interactive sculpture. The game is set in a speculative world inside our metaverse. And it's really about exploring the bubbled up feelings, collective consciousness and fervent beliefs of the contemporary moment. To begin the game, players must generate a unique username. Smooth Reality 374. Players have to work their way through a labyrinth of metaphorical decisions. The interactive sculpture is the map of the game, and it tracks the player's journey. Do you take the path of the Divine Mother?
Become a human god.
Stay on your moral high horse.
Gods are no longer elsewhere. Instead, they stand on top of giant melting icebergs, so that they can exist as high in the sky as possible.
runs, the water cries. It feels sadness and happiness, fear, joy, 痛み、喜び.
When reaching certain points within the game, players activate water mode, which creates a rippling across the water's surface. This was actually really important to us that the water could respond to the players' decisions, because in the game we're really trying to encourage players to visibly see and understand
It's phrasing a bit, but
their molecular.
I might pause it because I want to show a few other things, but I want to keep the presentation short. So I can stop it here. But basically, that as you play the game, you can also collect the tokens or video pieces that are of all the different objects inside the world. And then there's like this Pokemon style poster that you can also collect. So it's like also finding different ways in which people can interact with the artwork. So whether that's collecting things, whether that's like interactivity, whether it's just listening, whether that's interacting with the sculpture and the water, we're always trying to thinking of lots of entry points for the viewer or the audience to engage with the work, because people engage with the work all very differently. I know. Okay, I've got to go like this. You can see you can see here the poster and the this is kind of what you get if you download the assets as you play the game.
Can you zoom in on them at all, Hannah, so we can see them a bit close? Or maybe even just slideshow helps a little bit because they're really nice.
You can see here. I don't know if keep making the quality better. Okay.
You can see them. Yeah.
You can just about see them, and then I'll show this next piece here because so this is another piece called Player of Cosmic Realms.
We feel the contemporary rhetoric of the metaverse is being approached in a very short-sighted way. The metaverse is another level of highly advanced technologies and digital realms for us to be constantly living in. How we collectively approach the metaverse is we view it as cosmic, because transporting your consciousness into another realm is a spiritual act. Disembodying is something that needs to be approached holistically. So the questions we are asking are, what kind of future gaming environments and tools do we want to use to get us to the metaverse?
In Player of Cosmic Realms, the audience are invited to become players within an immersive gaming environment where they can interact with two different artworks, the life game and Better Bodies. We chose to present these two works together because they both reflect on expanding our human umwelt using emancipatory technology. Jakob von Uxküll coined the concept of umwelt. So all that a subject perceives becomes their own perceptual world, the Merkwelt, and all that they do becomes their effector world, the Werkwelt. Perceptual and effector worlds together form a closed unit, which is the umwelt.
The Life Game is an interactive film series. In the first episode, Viral Energy, the audience interact through touching the pop-ups as they appear on top of the film. The first pop-up appears after the protagonist, Me, downloads a new technology because they're feeling lonely, a digital twin called Mai. It's this uncanny moment where what the character behind the screen touches and what the player touches meets, connecting both the physical and digital realms as inextricable and as fictitious as one another.
Me and their digital twin Mai are connected through their dependency on and the shared animistic nature towards their screens.
We are longing for.
Over time, Me begins to understand that in this reality, self-centered technologies are disguised to be evoking connection whilst they actively produce loneliness. So this completely changes the way Me feels about Mai.
In the second episode, Battle of Reality, Me and Mai navigate a new decentralized system in the metaverse. It follows a separate path Me and Mai take after the breakdown of their whirlwind relationship.
In episode 3, Dreamtime Life Simulation, players are invited to view the interactive playing cards whilst watching the film.
In the metaverse, we often explore what kind of technologies we will need and what it might be like to exist through multiple avatars.
In Dreamtime Life Simulation, Me transforms into their avatars Matt and Mix. There they create their own emancipatory technologies and use the metaverse to connect to their ancestors. They were able to do this with the aid of the Ancestor tool, an internal technology used to listen to the ancestral whispers of wisdom.
For Better Bodies, we have been creating a new technology called the Meta Womb. It is a haptic wearable room currently in its beta stages. We are test driving how can the architecture and wisdom of the womb combined with haptic technology be used holistically to expand the unworld.
Probably the first time I've ever thought, like, I wonder what it feels like to be a pregnant animal.
Experiencing the sounds and the sensations, I was noticing what was happening in my body, like in my arms and my fingertips, and how I felt a little bit more grounded, I think.
I found myself going inside myself and then realising that I was holding and sort of felt quite protective over what I was cradling.
I feel like I got imaginary and visionary kind of picture of what happening in my wombs. Might be, another word, the metaverse.
So this piece is 2 pieces in one, and both of them, maybe I can actually keep on this page, So the first piece is like an interactive film, and it really explores these 2 characters called Me and My, and they basically, Me, the human character, creates a digital twin because they feel lonely, and then they realize that this digital twin is a self-centered technology, and self-centeredness creates loneliness, and then they go off in a different direction to try to find themselves in the metaverse. And it also like commentates a lot on like these imagined technologies that we imagined that could help the metaverse in an emancipatory way, and also in a way that would make you go in a strange direction. And then the piece Better Bodies, which is the haptic wearable womb, we've been basically inventing this new technology, which I've heard a lot of the people that will be viewing this do sound. So this one is quite focused on sound, this piece. And so it's a haptic wearable womb, which is made out of silicone. And it's got like, it's also got this stuff inside it that like makes it squidgy, that's like very almost like flesh-like. And inside the womb, we have transducers, we have haptics inside it, which feed both sound and vibration. And what happens is when you put it against your skin, and against in the belly, what happens is the sound kind of travels and gets trapped. So what happens is when you put sounds through it, you can feel sound in a very 3-dimensional way, as if it's like inside you, which is a very immersive and sensorial experience. And what we did was we actually put the sounds of different animals that communicate through ultrasound. So for example, one of them is a dolphin, and the dolphins communicate. How sound travels for them is they can create almost like 3D holograms underwater. So when you hear the dolphin, you almost get this sense of when the sound traveling, and it feels very 3-dimensional. And I guess like it really comes with exploring this idea of like, how do we as humans connect to things that are so unfamiliar to ourselves? But then also when we made this technology, obviously you make a technology and you have one intention, but then that intention doesn't necessarily, how people receive it is like their experience is like unique to them. So we've tested this on like probably now over 100 people. And what's super interesting is definitely people have very interesting reactions to the womb. and it's very like, either it's incredibly cathartic, or it's it makes people start having a lot of visuals, or it's like just very meditative, or people use it as like an observational tool. So it's very interesting how the different experiences people have from this. And then I think that's like, I have like a bit, I think that's pretty much it, because I think I've done about 15
Well, we can come back to some things, I think, as we speak, actually. So
do you want to continue sharing or no?
I was just going to ask, do you have any recording of the sounds from the room at all that you can play? Or
you could kind of hear it.
Yeah, I can hear it a bit in the background.
Yeah, it was like, I don't know, it's basically sound, it's like raw sound, like, well, it's not raw sound files, but it's like sound files of dolphins, tarsiers, bats, whales, rats, so that they are just literally the sounds of them.
Well, I tried the room the other week, because it's currently on show. This installation, or a version of this installation, is on show at Zabladovich Gallery at the moment as part of the exhibition Among the Machines. And it was really fun to try it on and experience it and feel the vibrations in relation to those sounds, and they're really nice sounds.
I love being in there. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna spend, like, I could literally be sat in it for so long. I was like,
It is like, relaxing. Well, maybe leave the presentation up. We can always flip back through it for now, but I like, while we're on there, while you're talking about this, like, one of the areas that I kind of wanted to chat about was the body. The body in relation to technology and these ideas around metaverse. And so, I think just to kind of expand on that, we'll zoom out a little bit around it as well. I think it can kind of be quite easy to assume that the experience of simulations and virtual worlds kind of entails some kind of like disembodiment and being kind of cut off in a way from your physical context. I'm just kind of like introducing this a little bit maybe, but so if you think of some of the kind of stereotypes maybe of this stuff, then you've got like Ready Player One, for example, where the central protagonist is like portrayed as being cut off from physical reality. He goes into his van, puts on a headset and some kind of crazy contraptions, and then that's it, he's kind of gone into the metaverse, I think it's Oasis or something like that, and is disconnected from his kind of physical context. But it's really not as simple as that, and I think that's kind of one of the really nice things that you're kind of showing in your work. And there's this kind of there can be a sense of disconnection, and there is that phenomenon of like depersonalization that can happen if people are too kind of, well, if you have an online addiction or something like that, that can kind of occur. But at the same time, digital technologies themselves are kind of inherently physical. The internet runs on cables under the sea. There's the hardware, haptics like you're using, and so on. And the mind and body aren't always able to differentiate between what is happening digitally as an experience and what's happening in so-called kind of real life. As technology becomes more and more sophisticated, I think those kind of boundaries just blur more and more, don't they? And I guess, I think you've touched on a lot of this, but I think there's maybe something to kind of expand on a little bit more, is around this sense of this contradiction maybe, or this kind of binary between the virtual and the physical, and how you're kind of moving beyond it in your work with like things like the haptic room. Like, what does it mean to you, and how material can the metaverse be?
So I guess like for us, like the metaverse being obviously our consciousness is a headset. So like, for example, it's like the reason why we can see the same thing. So what I am seeing in front of me is me too, because that's my headset. And the only reason why you can see that the same as me is because your headset is close enough to mine that we can see the same thing. So I guess for us, it's like the what we see in front of us is like we never, like, I think scientifically you never touch like anything, so we like to see the world as immaterial. And then I think the implications, I think that one of the things that is really problematic is seeing the world as material, and we know that through capitalism. So I think like for us it's always about seeing the world as material and being able to visualize the invisible and understand the kind of symbolic nature. So like I think like there's this really beautiful quote, actually I can probably show it to you because I've got the screen share. Let me just see if I might just actually drop it in like in one of the things here, because I think I'm really screen sharing one. It's a really beautiful quote. Let me just find it.
I mean, I from how I read what you're saying is almost like, it's in a way you could see, or another way of seeing it is maybe that the material and the immaterial, they're just kind of gradients of the same thing potentially anyway. That's the way I would interpret it, that is kind of an expanded field of both. They're so interconnected and inherently kind of interspersed with one another.
Everything is like a hallucination or an illusion, so basically, and like everything, like the probability of seeing like reality as it is like 0. So it's like for us it's like thinking of it as like we are energy, we're like spiritual beings, like transporting your consciousness into another realm. So whether that is like the metaverse or digital spaces is a spiritual act, because you're transferring the energy into like another realm. And like the problem is like we don't see the Oculus or Facebook as a spiritual place. We treat it as something that is like material, that like sells us stuff and puts our brain into like seeking mode, and makes us always want more and be overloaded with things so that we're confused, that we just want to numb ourselves. Which this is like one of the Budo dancers and one of the founding people that started Budo, and he said to live in today's world is to be surrounded by misleading symbols and tiresome conventions. So basically it's just like looking at like that was the main bit that I wanted to say, was like it's more about like, it's a bit more about how it's sort of like about just like the material, like the material and the immaterial. It's like, what are the symbols that are around us, and like are they misleading, are they tiresome, or are they like symbols that allow us to see the world in the way that we want to, and take like kind of almost like a message to show us where to go, or to allow us to work with the universe, I guess.
Yeah, and so another kind of question in relation to that and the body, I guess, that I'm interested in is like with your work is like what's the role of activating like senses like sound, like hearing, and touch in your work, in terms of like, maybe activating those messages as well, actually kind of using other senses, not just the visual to activate those.
So for example, it's like when you wear the haptic womb, what's so interesting about wearing the haptic womb, and it's actually a comment that our friend who's an artist called Daya actually mentioned when they experienced the work, and they said that like what's so interesting is like when you wear this womb and everyone has conversations about it afterwards, is that because everybody wants to talk about it, because everyone experiences senses, and everyone like touch is such an integral part of like how we perceive the world. But it's almost like because it's something that's like has no like, I'm trying to explain it the best way that he explained it, but because there is no like kind of preconceived way of talking about it, because we don't talk about it, everybody speaks about it in a way that feels like it's untouched. It feels as if it's like a conversation that can be had just from their own experience of, but there's no interpretation of it within a collective understanding. And I guess like one thing, like when you're wearing this womb, it's like you're basically picking up data. You're like, the womb is on you and from your belly, so you're reading information from your belly and feeling things and through your senses, and then thinking or not thinking. So that is a very different way to interacting with your phone or with your screen. So, and it feels like it's inside you and part of you. And it also feels like part of you in a much more organic way. So if you were to put on this belly, this technology, it feels like skin. It's like, you know, like soft robotics. It feels part of you. Whereas if you put a VR headset on, like, obviously if you feel immersed enough, you start to get lost, but it's very clunky. It feels quite like a masculine and stuff like that. It feels corporate instantly. So there's a very different feeling to how you embrace that technology. For example, if you program logical things into that womb, the womb doesn't work. If you program more illogical things into it, it works, because it's working with more of the reptilian side of your brain. So it's activating that, whereas like maybe the technology that is your phone, it's very much like concentrating on the neocortex, language, visuals, it's concentrating on decision making, logic. So it's like what parts of your brain does the technology even activate? So we're thinking about it not only like in a way of like, for example, the womb is it's blue, we see the womb as genderless, but also it's about activating different parts of your body and your brain and your consciousness.
And I think that relates to what you were saying as well earlier about, you know, how you think about the metaverse and kind of understanding the nature of beings. And yeah, I really like that idea. It's almost like, you know, what is also kind of thinking about beingness and what that can be, right? And how things like those soft robotics can either bring you back to your own body or connect you more widely to other bodies, human and non-human, in the case of the sounds and things like that, which is really nice.
I'm glad you got to try it. That's really
nice. I really enjoyed trying it, and there was a queue of people waiting. So I can say it was like getting a lot of interest and people really intrigued. I think.
Oh my God, they're so hard to make.
Well, like touched on so many interesting things there, but I think we'll probably keep coming back to them anyway as we go along. So maybe to think a little bit more about kind of questions around identity, and you know, and I'll just kind of introduce that in a less cosmic way, but and we can kind of explore it. So I was thinking kind of about avatars within kind of metaverse context, right? Obviously they've become increasingly popular in recent years, and just to kind of share some of the manifestations that they can take from kind of, they can be playable and non-playable virtual characters in games whose skins might be upgraded and traded, and you can get really highly kind of expressive avatars that people are making themselves and using in spaces like kind of VR social spaces, like VR chat, for example. And then you've got the kind of emergence of intelligent, interactive characters who might continually develop through learning for their interactions with others. And then kind of augmentation, like filters, and there's an artist there that's been to mind actually, as well as you guys, Keiken, like, but also Huntress Jones, I think Huntress Jonas, has been doing really nice things with face filters as well. And an artist also springs to mind in avatars is Danielle Braithwaite-Shirley, and the avatars she creates with her games are just like beautiful and powerful, I think. So, and avatars generally are kind of viewed as a kind of key component potentially of metaverse scenarios, particularly obviously simulations, immersive worlds, and there's this idea that the metaverse could be populated by these avatars. Some might be semi-autonomous entities, others could be closely connected to their kind of owners, as it were. and they can have this financial value if you want them to or not. And to me, avatars are a kind of, quite fascinating aspect of virtual worlds for those reasons, but moreover, it's for their express potential and their kind of close connection to identity and how that can be performed and embodied. So I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit more, and feel free to bring up your presentation again at any point or anything else you want to connect to around this. But I wanted to ask you about the different ways you use avatars in your work and the kinds of identities you're interested in exploring with them.
So I guess, we explore a lot with avatars. Recently, we were working, we love Huntress and Danielle as well. We were working with Gabriel Massam, and we together we were making avatars, and we were just going crazy because we both love avatars so much. So for us, the idea of an avatar is like, obviously it's a place to house our consciousness, and also it's to allow us to embrace our shape-shifting and metamorphic nature. So I guess like we often are creating avatars that are non-human, or we work with other artists, whether that's like a performer, and we basically create their avatars, and then we often create multiple versions of the same person because people are so multi-dimensional that they tend to have multiple avatars, whether that is aging or whether that is through non-human, or how they their own like ideas to how there's important symbols that should be on their bodies. And for us, I guess the avatar is infinite, and we also do explore how avatars can be insidious too. It's actually quite hilarious that in the film that we made in 2019, we had this corporate wellness world which was called Poem Sector, and in that world, in this world, it was actually played by Sakima Crook, who is a dancer and activist and a performer and model. And in the world, it's like she played the character, and she goes to this world called Poem Sector, and the first thing you have to do is you have to choose what body you want to occupy. And for that day, the theme was Kylie times Kimono Day, and everybody had to occupy the body of Kylie Jenner so they can all feel falsely connected to one another. And a few days before that was Dalai Lama Day, so of course they felt like super wise, and of course they were. And it's a bit like, what you see now with the NFT space and people having apes and stuff like that, and you can only be part of this club and everyone has the same identity. I think at the time we were really taking the piss, but also talking about how certain identities, you cannot enter that space because all the identity or the culture and consciousness is one kind of person, and also false connection through identities and similarities, or seemingly on the surface level of similarities. And it's quite funny that we were joking about it, and it actually has already come true, unfortunately. And it's like, obviously there's like political implications of this.
I think you're talking about Bored Ape Yacht Club, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the Bored Ape, just like in case you want to look at that. It's a very particular kind of crypto bro world, to say the least.
But it's also, for them, it's not being like an artwork, it's about being like a community, and like an online community. So they all occupy this body, and then there's derivatives, and a lot of people who cannot afford the Bored Ape, they'll make derivatives and sell them and make money, and they're like the lower class of Bored Ape. But it's like, and it's like very on the surface it's just like, oh, whatever, it's this thing. But actually, like, if we start occupying these bodies, like, it's going to be like such a like if you occupy these bodies in a much more full-bodied way, and also actually it doesn't even have to be full-bodied, because I know people from the crypto space who are my friends, and they occupy avatars and they change avatars, and it's a huge part of them like perceiving themselves. What is incredible though is seeing is how much being in more abstract forms allows people to be different versions of themselves or feel more free. Like the body is also something that is like, we have such a sense of self, but if we had a decentralized nervous system, we would behave very differently, and we wouldn't have certain problems with equality the way that we do. So but yeah, I think for us to be honest, Avatar is infinite.
Yeah, and very, like you say, there's this kind of role-playing aspect to them, and that can be kind of have negative connotations or be used negatively, can be kind of emancipatory and freeing, and it's really, yeah, it can go either way. Have you got any particular avatars? You were saying you were making those that you want to share. No worries if not, but
I feel like we made some really beautiful ones recently with Gabrielle, but it's not come out yet, so I should I don't know when this is coming out, when is this coming out?
I'm not totally sure either. I think probably there's some translation to be done on it, so maybe in a week or so. So it might, I don't know.
Okay, so yeah, so I think I should not share it because
well, people will have to, yeah. Where will they be? Where will people be?
I think it's with the photographer's gallery, and yeah, I think those avatars will be really lovely to see, because we've been working with each other to do them, and like what's interesting about their avatars is they really the aesthetic of their work is like everything is so interconnected, and they make a lot of like non-human characters, but when you look closely at them, they all, like, say if it's like looks more like a plant or a rock, but everything has like an abstraction of like a face if you look close enough, and it's like, it's really like, you know, everything is connected, everything is alive, everything is organic, and their world that they're creating really is constantly reiterating this message of interconnectivity and everything being alive and organic. And I think that's like a very very beautiful and positive like message. They make a lot of emancipatory avatars. Yeah,
very nice. What's their name again, in case anyone wants to?
Gabriel Massam.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, moving on a little further then to look at maybe a little bit more specifically at gender in relation to this. Yeah, thinking about the representation of gender in virtual worlds can be interesting. And I think, you know, many of the virtual worlds that a lot of us might visit are still like created and dominated by men, often white men of a certain background. And this is changing, which is good, but still we also know very well that technological tools kind of reflect the perspectives and cosmologies of the people who make them, and that can result in biases. And you know, in games that's manifested, for example, through a lack of Afro hair types in past. Maybe I think that's changing a bit, but still that's like one of the examples. And you know, or a lack of ethnically diverse kind of lead characters, or highly sexualized representations of women. I mean, the list could go on really, but and there are also kind of cases of direct harassment or violence against women and other marginalized groups, which can take place in virtual worlds, but also spill over into real kind of so-called real life. And yeah, there's been like notorious harassment campaigns like Gamergate that have occurred over the years in this space. So yeah, it can be kind of scary, and depending on who's building it, the metaverse, or you know, worlds within the metaverse, could amplify these kinds of issues. so that kind of leads to, well, a lot of questions. It's a big subject and an important one. But in relation to your practice, I'd say like something I notice is that you kind of tend to work with characters which might be female or non-binary or non-human. And I wondered, you know, I think that's probably pretty intentional, and whether you would see that as kind of trying to counter almost this kind of dominant kind of male demographic in the virtual space, and kind of, yeah, bring a different kind of angle to it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yeah, what do you think?
So the first time we started to work with avatars is we went into this software called DAS, and this is like many years ago, and you basically, like, it has like, pretty much most technology, like avatar type technology, it normally has like a template of a white person. So for example, if you use like Spark AR, when you download the starter pack, you get a male and a female version of, you know, like the face filters. You need to use like a template of a face. That template of the face is a white male and a white male and white female. So it's like already programmed to like be in a disposition of that. So that's like, for example, when we first were in the beta stages of AR, what we did was we created a queer filter, so that, because this was when it wasn't even popular and you could get loads of followers because everyone had to follow you to get your filter, because there was only like, we were doing the AR filters using the Facebook technology when there was still like 800 people in the group. So it wasn't like a released technology yet. And so
when was that? What kind of year was that? Was that like, I
don't remember, like 2018, 19?
Yeah, I feel like it must have been something like that.
Yeah, and we actually like saw it was like the time, I know when it was, because we made the filter in reference to the, we loved the, like in Drag Race, the Evie Oddly outfit on the final show, which was like with the mirrored outfit. And we were just talking about how, like, you know, through AR, like what's so crazy is that you could make that, and it would be so hard to make, and also to be in safe spaces to like role play and to dress up. Like not everybody has the freedom to do that, or the access or the resources. And then we just started talking about how, like, oh well, like this at the moment, because it was such early days, it was only when the first few filters came out, we were like, oh well, if we make that filter, that means it will go to queer communities, and more queer communities will know about filters and the technology. And so we did that, and we made that filter, and overnight we just got like so many followers because everybody's wearing the filter. But it was amazing because you got all these amazing videos. At the beginning we were like, okay, we don't do drag ourselves, like obviously we're interested in it, and I think we're inherently like queer as artists. Like we're not artists who are working, we are working with the ethoses of fluidity and non-conformity. Like that's so important to our practice. But we were like, oh, is this like our place to be doing this? And then as soon as we made the filter, we were like, no, it was good that we did that. Like it was like the joy that it gave people, and we knew that because people were celebrating and dancing in all these videos and just having the time of their lives in it, pretending to like enacting or being part of this like quite is it like one monolithic kind of like event that happened in like people who, like especially like Evie Oddly as an actual artist is like such an incredible and actually very conscientious person, who is all about non-conformity, and also like they talk a lot about their practice being about they're really interested in how like things shouldn't be like not things being expensive and material, because it's so important to keep the grit of queerness. And then so that was like one experience we had. Another experience was when we were first making the avatars and we didn't know how to make them, and we had to use template avatars. There was the software DAS, which we no longer use, and it was very hard to find at that time avatars that weren't white avatars. It was actually very, very difficult, and we were kind of like, they all look the same, but we don't have the skills to be able to change this, especially in the time frame where we need to make this work. And then, so what we ended up doing is it made us really think about like, well, who are the characters that we're working with, and like when we make an avatar, the responsibility we hold into creating other like you're making another body and another face, and that is a very like, that's actually like quite a big deal in some ways. And so that's when we started to work with Sakima and Linda, and it was so beautiful because everything just had this amazing synergy where like they were the characters, but then they had this like alternate reality story that we made. And so with Sakima and Linda, we actually 3D scan their faces, and because we didn't know how at the time to be able to move the faces or like make facial expressions, we had to move the camera to make it look like there was facial expressions. But so with Sakima,
these are other artistic collaborators.
Yeah, so Sakima Crook and Linda Rocco. So Sakima, as I mentioned, so Sakima is a Black trans artist, and she so obviously like trying to like working with her, it's like, how do you obviously respect everything that you do? But it's, to be honest, it's like we are so close friends, we share our inner worlds with each other, so it's like we believe in the same thing. We believe so much in like metamorphosis and how everything is connected. So but when you're doing that process, you do feel like an immense responsibility to take care of their avatar, that they are allowing you to be able to make this digital version of them. But then also what's so interesting is like, you ask somebody, how do you want to look like in the metaverse? What is your ideal self? And like when you ask people this, there is so much different to what you can imagine, and it's so non-conformist to what you can imagine too, and it's so personal to them. And so yeah, it was a really interesting experience of doing that with Sakima. And then with Linda Rocco, who's a curator, and she's also doing her PhD, and she also does a lot, like she curates a lot for artists with disabilities, because she has a disability herself, and so she's a huge advocate of these spaces, and she holds space for these people and make space. And Linda, it was so Linda, so when she used to be a professional dancer, and obviously Sakima also is a professionally trained dancer. And so Linda, she literally like performed everywhere by the time that she was 19, but one day she woke up and she couldn't move her body at all, and she has this disability that affects her mobility and her senses. And actually there's some crazy things, because when she closes her eyes, she has no sense of where her body is.
Yeah.
And so, but the piece itself was exploring the avatar itself was exploring lots of the idea of experiencing different senses that people can't imagine or don't know about. And what was so incredible about that is Linda danced for the first time in 10 years with Sakima, and then we recorded that motion capture and put it into the avatar. And then so that we don't only have that data recorded forever, we also that moment was so beautiful. Like I remember, like even when I say it now, I get chills all through my body, like so immensely, like my body's vibrating when because it was so incredible. And like going through that experience with Linda, and Linda's like she's like a born performer. Like when we gave her the script to work with, one take, she's got it down. It's like she is like a born performer. And like but it shows how much like motion capture, avatar, working like this, it was all like a holistic process. And because we're all friends, it's just like, you know, it just feels like there is love with each other and we are just doing something together. But the lessons you learn as you go along, and the importance of it, to hold each other, to make space for each other, to look after each other's bodies, to be able to move together, all these kinds of things, like they're so important. And there's so much to do with just the human experience and how people are so dialectic and diversional and so interconnected. And so that those were very much like a lot of our like learning experiences with the avatar, and why it's so important, why it's so personal, why we need to take time to care for the avatars that we are creating, all those kinds of lessons. Yeah.
And I think, I mean, I'd love to talk about avatars more, but I think we have to move on to think about and come more to like the making and the tools and things like that. But I think what that, you know, really emphasizes is we need more people, a much broader spectrum of people working with and making and adapting these tools that exist, right? So that there can be this so much more plurality of expression with them. And and working these kind of more holistic ways would be really nice as well. And I think there's this perception that, you know, to work with the metaverse, maybe that it implies working with some very high-end technologies, and you know, and some of what you're working with in the games engines and stuff, they're really slick, and having access to motion capture, virtual reality, you know, not everyone has it, but it doesn't always have to be the case that things have to be so high tech anyway. And there are different kind of platforms and spaces that are allowing people to work in maybe a slightly kind of lower tech ways as well. So just to mention one that people might want to look up, there's New Art City, whose focus is primarily on accessibility. But I just wondered if you could recommend any tools that people can explore, or platforms as a bit of an entry point to experimenting with kind of metaverse type scenarios. So you've obviously been on a journey with this as well yourselves.
Yeah. So I guess like it's really dependent on like what exactly you want to do. But I think when you go to use digital tools, it can feel so overwhelming because it's so infinite and there's so many things you could possibly do. And so one of the things, like recently, I think we all gave some different tutorials. The tutorial that I was giving, we talked about how like what's important is to like find like a specific tutorial that you want to do and try doing that, but also, and just using YouTube. That's what we do, we just YouTube everything. But then also sometimes what's really good is to find a tutorial that covers a few different things so that you go through a whole stage of processes. So that's what we tend to do. So sometimes when we're learning a new thing, we find a tutorial that's a bit longer, and we're slowly over time learning the whole process of beginning to end. And that works really well. In terms of free softwares, like if you want to make a world, you need to house that really to make it like the most interoperable. You need to use a gaming engine, and Unreal Engine is the one that we use and we would always recommend to other people. What's so incredible about Unreal Engine is that they have this big funding pot where they basically, their goal is to make a metaverse basically. So they actually give money to make a lot of like plugins and different assets for free. So for example, they bought Quixel, and Quixel is a free, you can get free assets and free objects that are completely like photogrammetry objects. They look so realistic, and you can use their like plugin Bridge, which actually I don't think I'd recommend Bridge. I hate Bridge, but it's like you can use that plugin to then import the assets into Unreal Engine. But that's like a free software again. And there's, for example, if you want to do modeling, like Blender's a free software that's like open source, that's very infinite. I think obviously you've got to find like what suits you. Also working with someone else, if someone else also wants to learn CGI, setting a goal together can make it feel like you're less alone, for sure. Yeah, and definitely like recognizing that you don't need to be the most technically gifted. Actually, sometimes when you are focusing so much on the craft of it, you forget about your creative side, because there's a lot more limitations when you start making it more technical, interruptible, and more more difficult, the more complicated pipelines. So like, for example, it's some things that are really easy, that are much easier to learn, for example, is like, say if you wanted to make a film, you could just literally download a free pack from Unreal Engine of, say, like there's one, so for example, one that's really popular is like City Park, for example, and you get this amazing trees, and you can just literally learn how to film inside it. The filming inside a gaming engine is not difficult. It's like it's not the most hardest thing to learn, but you can literally make a film of like you just moving around in nature, and it's like you didn't have to do anything. All you needed to do was like import the like literally just press a few buttons to import the environment, and then you learn the setup of how to film with a camera, and then you export it. So there's a lot of things that you can do that is not as complicated as it may seem, but definitely giving some parameters, because I think it gets very intimidating very easily. But it's okay. You'll get through this. You will get PTSD though from CPR, but you'll be okay.
I think, and obviously there's three kind of core Keiken people, but you've got a pool, I think, of people that, well, you've already mentioned some that you kind of collaborate really closely with on different projects and in different ways. So everyone brings different skills and different experiences and things like that, and different perspectives, which probably makes a big difference as well. So I can imagine, like you mentioned it, like collaboration can be super useful with all of this. And I just wondered, just because some of there's a particular interest in the ASA project around sound, whether you've had how you've kind of worked with sound in your pieces, like have you done that in collaboration with others, or what have been some of your considerations?
Sound is so important to our work. Luckily, Tani, who's the other co-founder, and obviously Isabel Ramos, another co-founder, we did it together, and then lots of other people also collaborate with us. But luckily, so Tani's partner, Flore, who is Waves of Space, they basically make most of the music for our pieces, and they're incredibly gifted. So it's really incredible working with him. He's like a Romanian musician, and so we're very lucky to collaborate with him all the time, because I don't know what we'd do without him.
What are the when you work with him, are there any particular learnings or insights that you've had from kind of, I don't know if you've had the chance much to like observe some of his process and some of the things he's kind of considering?
Recently we bought the I can't remember what it's called. We bought the it's like this voice manipulator thing that it's like the main voice manipulator that people buy, that's like, it has over 300 different default settings, but also lots of artists use it just for all kinds of things. So we're starting to dig a bit into that, because sometimes we do, for example, sometimes we do make a few vocal sounds with our work, make vocals and like lyrics, and we do sometimes work with my brother's made like work sounds for us as well and stuff. But I think in terms of consideration, I guess I don't think we have I don't know, because we're not musicians, so I'll probably just we're not thinking of it probably in the way that into the detail and the depth that maybe Flore would, but we do give a lot of sound references, and we know how important sound is. Like I get so sad if the volumes turn down on our work, because we put Florey's music so loud in our work, because we really want the sound to travel with the voices. And so we're normally thinking of it in a much more an emotional level. Now you feel like this, and now you feel like that, but we're not experts by any means.
Yeah, it plays such an important role in, as well as like directing your attention, whether that's like with the haptic room as well, like or like how you feel in your body, and like what you're sensing, what you're understanding. It can direct what your attention is and how you feel and where you're looking.
Sound is like magic. It's just like it's like invisible magic that makes you like it's so cool. It's very powerful, it's very godly.
Yeah. So okay, and just one more question around creative expression, really. Obviously, like I think probably people are getting the sense now about how you work and how kind of creatively kind of free that is, and how expressive, and it's can feel like quite a big contrast maybe to some like of the more corporatized versions of the metaverse that are out there. So for example, putting all the other issues that there are with meta aside, like surveillance and manipulation, all that kind of thing, also the aesthetics of meta, like when you kind of look at the launch, are just so like deadly dull and homogenized, and almost kind of childish really in the way that they are. And I just wondered, like, any top line thoughts on how do we make sure that metaverse is free, is a place for free creative expression, that we don't all become these like meta like avatars. I think I'd probably resist that anyway. But.
Yeah, I don't think that many people are going to want to spend. I think it's just Gutenberg is just trying to mark his territory by doing the meta, and like he also is like really wants to be seen as an innovator, but he's not as innovative as he thinks he is. So and then so it's but yeah, so I guess like again it's like we like to see things as like a cosmic game, and that like transporting our consciousness to another realm is a spiritual act. So therefore, like the way that we think about things, we need to think about holistically. So if you are going into another realm, like a metaverse, what about the body and the environment you're in, like your physical body? We won't be completely detached from that. You might feel like your consciousness is, but we will also have a physical body. I think that we do definitely need a whole re-evaluation on how we understand ourselves as humans, as we understand ourselves interconnected to all beings and all life forms in nature. So if the earth is unhappy and is suffering, we will suffer too. So I think that like how we understand the metaverse is like we need to understand this interconnective organism that we are, or organisms that we are, and we have to be careful not to create, like there's no point creating metaverses that feel very real if it's driven by ego or materialism, because if we do that, we will trap we'll never be able to escape to the worlds that we want to escape to, the realms we want to escape to. So when we imagine these places and these bodies, it really needs to be in a way that really reconnects us to the things that we truly, what are truly our basic needs. And I think that is like a whole, like I think the collective consciousness will just completely change like the way that we understand humans, and also we can defy all that we think we know. Like everything is like an illusion in a sense. So I think that like we can like to be honest, how I think the metaverse will be, I think it will be completely unidentifiable to how we imagine it to actually be. And as long as we are not driven by the ego and the material, or we use counteract that through like self-sovereignty and through a different awareness and knowledge, collective knowledge, we will create these beautiful spaces and communities.
And kind of like,
yeah,
going back to what you were saying about this cosmic game and things like that, and all the things we've been touching on, really, kind of like the idea of what if you have different standpoints, right? So starting points for how you conceive of how you might want to approach making in the metaverse or whatever, is like starting from the point of your needs, or the point of beingness, and exploring that in the different forms it can take, or a point of feeling, felt knowledge, then what that is going to result in is a lot less likely to be your kind of Zuckerberg style meta zone. It could be, it kind of is open to take many different forms. So yeah,
we need to ignore that. Like meta doesn't need to take up any of our consciousness whatsoever.
Other things. Yeah, exactly. So just to conclude, because we've come into the end of the time, I wondered if you've got a recommendation at all to suggest for anyone to look at for a kind of, they want to kind of explore more people working in this space. Is there any kind of experience or artwork or whatever it is that you might point to?
I know the ones that you were going to suggest, but I think they are good ones to suggest. I think Huntress is a good one to suggest, like you said before. Gabriel's a good one to suggest in very similar areas of work. They're all really really good.
So the ones I was going to suggest then were, I think it's super interesting to have a look at Your Progress Will Be Saved, which was a commission that Manchester International Festival here in the UK did within Fortnite Creative, and that's by an artist and avatar called La Turbo Avedon. And that's a super interesting exploration that's gamic, obviously, and it's taking place in Fortnite, but it's also kind of one of the first instances of a cultural organization kind of thinking about actually commissioning work within a games environment. So it's kind of also interesting to consider, not just as an artistic experience, but also from the point of view of kind of cultural infrastructure and how that's changing too. And Fortnite is owned by Epic Games, who are also another big exponent of the metaverse and want to see themselves as building it. So you can start to kind of get a sense of how that space feels. And also on the music side, Fortnite have been doing things like, hosting concerts in real time by rappers like Travis Scott and all sorts of stuff. So it's quite an interesting space to explore in that regard. And mentioned Danielle Braithwaite-Shirley's work earlier, and any of her work is amazing to explore, possibly starting with Black Trans Archive. But there's some recommendations, and
I think Tapo's been doing a lot. There's a world, it's actually very similar, like the world that they're exploring at the moment is like a decentralized space for like artists, so they have like self-sovereignty. I don't know if it's the Materia one or I can't remember, I don't know what the name of it is again, but then but it's very similar to like the concept that we explored for 068 for Film My Metaverse. Is very much what the Turbo is like trying to, they're very strong parallels in terms of this kind of beta kind of space that is self-sovereignty of the individual, the people. And I think that project's going to be really interesting of theirs as well.
And they're definitely just worth having a little explore at, because they've been through their works, they've been kind of exploring this space for a long while as well.
Very both of them are like really amazing artists and people.
So on that note, thank you very much, Keiken, and thank you very much, Hannah, for sharing your practice with us and your thoughts. It's been really fun and to talk through some of those aspects of it with you. And and thanks also to Lighthouse and Shesaid.so community, and Oi Futuro for having us for this conversation. And yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank
and
you.
Bye everyone.
Bye everyone.